The Bolsheviks in Transcaucasia were also desperate. Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan declared their independence from Russia, but could not resist the Turks with their own military forces. The Baku City Council appealed for British aid. On August the 14th, 1918, a small British unit arrived. When they left a month later, Turkish forces entered the city. In November 1917, in the Central Asian region of Turkestan, Red forces held only cities in the central and eastern areas. The Turkestan Republic was cut off from Russia by Ataman Dutov's Cossacks and White Czech forces. In 1918, the forces of the Bukhara Emirate and the Khiva Khanate began to attack the Soviets throughout the region. The creation of a Red military force in Turkestan was hampered by a tradition that prohibited military conscription. Still, by the end of 1918, the Red Turkestan Army numbered about 20,000 men. Red Guards units and guerrilla bands operated successfully against anti-Bolsheviks in Central Asia. At the same time, critical events were taking place in Europe. On November the 9th, a revolution took place in Germany. Kaiser Wilhelm had abdicated and fled to Holland. The Social Democrats declared Germany a democratic republic. Workers' and soldiers' Soviets sprang up. A communist government briefly held power in Hungary. With the end of World War I, the Germans began a withdrawal from the Ukraine. Field Marshal Eichhorn shot himself. Germany's defeat freed Allied resources that could be diverted for large-scale intervention on behalf of the Whites. In November 1918, English and French ships entered the Black Sea and landed in Odessa and other Black Sea ports. The number of Allied troops in the south soon reached 130,000. Allied landings in Vladivostok brought more than 150,000 troops from Japan, Britain, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Serbia, China, Canada, Italy, and the United States. The Daily Telegraph editorialized that no victory over Germany, however great it could be, would be complete if it were not accompanied by the liberation and reformation of Great Russia. Japan, in order to enhance its influence on the Asian mainland, strengthened its military presence in the Russian Far East. The Americans hoped to limit Japanese influence in the region. As 1918 ended, the entire Russian Far East was under the control of foreign armies. Americans and the Japanese held strategic points. Allied consulates were opened in the region's cities. As 1918 drew to an end, Soviet Russia's predicament was desperate, its future more and more uncertain. The Bolsheviks had been saved from defeat only by dissension among their opponents and the severe policies known as war communism that extracted the emaciated country's last remaining resources. Russia's economy was in ruins. Hunger and disease beset Russia's people. thousands of homeless orphans formed a giant army of beggars. Most railways had been destroyed, causing the shutdown of many large industrial enterprises. Economic losses were incalculable, as was the toll in loss of life. Nevertheless, at the end of 1918, the new Bolshevik government had acquired the most important tool for maintaining power: a strengthened, enlarged, and combat-ready army. In January 1919, the Red Army took Riga and Vilnius in the northwest, Kharkov and Baranovichi in the south. The new Soviet governments in Lithuania and Belorussia combined to form a Soviet Socialist Republic. In February, the Red troops that took Kiev were welcomed by the city's residents, who believed the Bolsheviks might restore stability. Antonov Avsyenko was commander of the Ukrainian front, and Christian Rakovsky, head of the Soviet Ukrainian government. In the spring, the Whites were more successful. As Denikin launched his drive northward, the White position in Siberia changed dramatically. Admiral Alexander Kolchak, the renowned Arctic explorer, became supreme ruler. During World War I, Kolchak's effective leadership of the Russian Navy in the Baltic led to his appointment as commander of the Black Sea Fleet. After the February Revolution, he traveled to Petrograd and became an envoy of the provisional government to the United States and Great Britain. In October 1918, he returned to Russia and became Minister of War in the Omsk government. Two major anti-Bolshevik governments had vied for authority in Siberia. Komuch, the committee of the members of the Constituent Assembly, was formed with Czech support in Samara in June 1918 and later moved to Omsk. At the same time, the provisional Siberian government was established in Tomsk. The leader of the Tomsk administration, Pyotr Vologodsky, believed individual dictatorship would provide the most effective administrative system. He became the head of a third new government, the Ufa Directorate. And in November, with Allied help, masterminded a coup that transferred power from his Council of Ministers to Kolchak, now both supreme ruler of Russia and commander-in-chief of its armed forces. Kolchak's power was limited by obligations to the Allies. His decisions required the approval of General Yanin, the Allied commander in Siberia, and General Knox, responsible for Allied aid to the front. While Kolchak actually commanded only about half the military units operating in Siberia, his 112,000 men formed a powerful combat force. On March the 6th, Kolchak launched an offensive. Within a week, his troops took Ufa. By the end of April, they recaptured an area of 200,000 square kilometers with a population of 5 million people. The Reds and Whites fought for the territory of the Russian Empire, which encompassed 1/6 of the Earth's land surface and stretched from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean. The 2-week journey from Moscow to Vladivostok by rail spanned the vast, sparsely populated spaces of Siberia, Russia's Asian territory known for its isolation and harsh climate that extended from the Ural Mountains to the Far East. Lenin exhorted Russia's people to fight against Kolchak's rapidly advancing army. 15,000 communists responded to the Bolshevik appeal for reinforcements on the Eastern Front.
Sergei Kamenev was appointed commander of the front. Mikhail Frunze was placed in charge of the decisive southern section. Frunze's April attack on Kolchak's strike units unleashed one of the war's bloodiest battles. By mid-May, Kolchak's defenses crumbled, and in June, Ufa fell. As Frunze's advance continued, disagreement split the Bolshevik high command. Kamenev, backed by Stalin, wanted to press eastward against Kolchak, while Vatsetis, supported by Trotsky, planned a drive against Denikin in the south. Stalin prevailed, and the offensive in the east continued. In the Urals, troops under the command of Vasily Chipayev waged a successful campaign against Kolchak. Chipayev himself was wounded during a white counterattack and died trying to swim across the Ural River. He was immortalized in songs and stories of the war. During the summer of 1919, the largest cities of the Urals and western Siberia, Perm, Ufa, and others, fell to the Reds. By mid-October, the Reds were 500 kilometers away from Omsk, and in November, Kolchak's Council of Ministers, headed by Pipilyayev, left Omsk for Irkutsk. Kolchak left Omsk November the 12th in an armored train. 2 days later, the Red Army entered the city. It took Kolchak 2 months to reach Irkutsk. On January the 4th, 1920, he transferred power to Grigory Semyonov. Semyonov, together with his henchman Baron Roman Ungern, a psychopathic sadist, and other atamans, ruled the huge Baikal territory with a grisly terror known as the Atamanshina. The Japanese, in their attempt to secure control of the Far East, deployed greater numbers of troops in the region. By late 1919, the total was about 80,000 men. Like the Atamans, the Japanese also ruled with terror. Military units in the countryside killed all suspected Bolshevik sympathizers. Their atrocities destroyed white support and strengthened the Red position. European and American units would leave Siberia in the spring of 1920, but the Japanese maintained a large contingent of troops who continued to fight Red, White, and Ataman forces. A wave of guerrilla movement swept Siberia. Guerrilla warfare had always been a key element in Russia's military strategy and continued so throughout the Civil War. Though guerrilla units were scattered and poorly equipped, entire divisions were eventually formed. Estimates of their numbers reached the hundreds of thousands. Minute knowledge of local conditions gave the guerrilla forces their unique advantage, and their attacks kept the white rear disorganized and confused. Guerrillas operated throughout the country, except in the center. By the end of 1919, guerrilla units had surrounded Irkutsk, where Kolchak was preparing to leave his armored train. Before Kolchak reached Irkutsk, his authority had collapsed. Allied and Czech support was withdrawn. On November the 17th, Czech General Radula Gaida, the commander of the Siberian army, dismissed by Kolchak, staged an uprising against the admiral in Vladivostok. Following an uprising in Irkutsk, a group of Mensheviks and social revolutionaries formed a new government known as the Political Center. On January the 15th, Czech troops, with General Yanin's knowledge, arrested Kolchak and his associates not far from the city and turned them over to the local government. A few days later, the Political Center transferred power to the Bolsheviks. Kolchak became a prisoner of the Irkutsk Cheka. Records of his interrogation filled 19 volumes. On February the 7th, during a White Army advance, the Cheka executed him without a trial. His body was thrown into a hole in the ice of the Angara River. After Kolchak's death, no threat to the Soviet regime existed east of the Ural Mountains.